So last night, President Trump, during his State of the Union, went after, of course, Venezuela, and went after socialism. Of course, because those two things are obviously, go hand in hand, right? And he declared proudly that the United States will never be a socialist country. Now, it's funny because, of course, AOC, when they had that, when he was saying that, they actually panned the camera to both AOC and Bernie Sanders. And, of course, they're one of the few Democrats that actually didn't burst out into applause, unlike people like, say, Joe Manchin, right? Like, oh, man, oh, yeah, never socialist. Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, now, a lot of reporters had some questions about why AOC decided not to stand. And she said plainly, quote, "I think he's scared." Of course, Donald Trump. She also says he sees that everything is closing in on him, and he knows he's losing the battle of public opinion when it comes to actual substantive proposals that we're advancing. So now, that's a really good answer, because whenever you have a conversation about things like, universal health care, like Medicare for all, for example, single payer, it's always met with, but, Venezuela, right? We can't have that, because then we will turn into Venezuela and we'll be eating rats. At least that's what, of course, Fox News always says, right? But in reality, a majority of Americans, yes, even Republicans, are in favor of a single-payer healthcare system. Why? It's because, look, everybody loves Medicare, right? Medicare is one of the most popular programs in the country, and it's been proven to work. And so it's also been proven to work in other countries, for example, Northern Europe, right? So they never talk about the Northern European countries. They never talk about Canada. They do talk about Canada, but only in a negative way. And there's a lot of BS about Canada and wait times and things like that. But they generally don't talk about the UK either. So they don't use the examples that actually work. It's always Venezuela, 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 right? Which, of course, Venezuela has a lot of problems, the United States included, because whenever there happens to be a socialist government that pops up in the southern hemisphere, the United States is usually there to try to crush it and encourage coups and things like that, which is exactly what we're doing in Venezuela right now. But anyway, I think her answer to that was excellent. And she has another answer, of course. But first, she was criticized by conservative commentator Peggy Noonan. Now, I love her response to this as well. She says, and this is Noonan, "And good nature with the white jackets, who I see some on Twitter are calling the straight jackets, AOC had a rare bad night, not looking spirited, warm, and original as usual, but sullen, teenaged, and at a loss." To which AOC had responded, quote, "Why should I be spirited and warm for this embarrassment of a State of the Union? Tonight was an unsettling night for our country. The president failed to offer any plan, any vision at all for our future. We're flying without a pilot, and I'm not here to comfort anyone about that fact." I love that. There's more. Now, after the State of the Union, she had a chance to talk with MSNBC's Chris Matthews. Now, I love this exchange here, because they're going to ask about socialism, and of course, we're going to see also how MSNBC has become kind of embarrassing and is definitely not a home for progressives. Let's take a look.
Congresswoman, thank you. Congratulations, by the way. We've never met, but congratulations on your upset victory in the primary. What did you make of the president's, I thought, pretty aggressive statement about Venezuela tonight? And he talked about being a socialist country and how we're never going to be a socialist country. It was pretty truculent, but it tied the notion of socialism to that particular regime. What do you think about the president, why he did that?
Well, I think that he needs to do it because he feels like he feels himself losing on the issues. Every single policy proposal that we have adopted and presented to the American public has been overwhelmingly popular, even some with a majority of Republican voters supporting what we're talking about. When we talk about a 70% marginal tax rate on incomes over $10 million, 60% of Americans approve it. 70% of Americans believe in improved and expanded Medicare for all. A very large amount of Americans believe that we need to do something about climate change and that it is an existential threat to ourselves and to our children. And so I think he sees himself losing on the issues. He sees himself losing on the wall, on the southern border, and he needs to grasp at an ad hominem attack. And this is his way of doing it. But what we really need to realize that what is happening is that this is an issue of authoritarian regime versus democracy. And in order for him to try to, dissuade or throw people off the scent of the trail, he has to really make and confuse the public. And I think that that's exactly what he's trying to do.
Again, that's an excellent answer. But I just kind of have to point out how Chris Matthews is like, yeah, I've never actually met you before. Yeah, you know why? You never talked about her. It's almost as if Chris Matthews just realized that he had a show and was like, oh, I never invited AOC on before. Yeah, I know. In fact, during her primary campaign, there was basically a media blackout. Only independent media, and mainly the Young Turks, covered AOC. Nobody else would talk about her. Nobody else would have her on. And now, hilariously, here's Chris Matthews saying, oh, right, I've never met you. Congratulations on your victory. Of course. Again, it's almost as if he's like, has like a show that he could invite, people on and actually talk to them and expose them to a new audience. But of course, never, right? But anyway, no, when it comes to the substance, yes, she rattled off a bunch of polls, which are correct. I mean, again, you've got 70% approval for higher tax rates, marginal tax rates in the rich. Most people support it. Even a Fox News poll, you have 80% of people that actually support a Green New Deal. You have Medicare for all. That's incredibly popular as well, over 70% of Americans. So on the policy issues, progressives are winning. Progressives have better policy when compared to, of course, Republicans, because you know what the Republican tax plan polled at? 34%. That is dismal. A majority of the country, 2/3 are saying we hate this because we know that it benefits only the richest Americans. Even Trump supporters who are doing their taxes now are realizing, oh my God, we just got screwed voting for President Trump because he only helped the rich and powerful. So, of course, as AOC was saying, they got to grab on to whatever kind of attack. And, of course, it's Venezuela. Venezuela, Venezuela, Venezuela. Everything is terrible there. And if we do Medicare for all, then somehow we will end up like Venezuela. It's not at all true. It's a terrible attack. And by the way, there's another thing that he missed, right? We already actually have socialism in America. So that entire statement doesn't actually mean anything. I mean, again, we are a mixed market economy, right? What we have now is mail delivery, police, firefighters, the military. Guess what? That's socialism. So it's nice how you always just happen to ignore the socialism in our country that actually does work and where it can actually be applied reasonably. For example, in things like healthcare. Healthcare, I think, should not be private. It should be public, and it should be accessible to everybody. Healthcare is a human right, and most Americans agree. So she's right. Trump and the Republicans are scared because their policy agenda is deeply, deeply unpopular. And what is popular is stuff that will make people like Trump have to pay just a little bit more in taxes. And that's what it's always been about. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.